Distinguished audience, hi. My name is Nikolay Murashkin. I'm a research fellow at the JICA Ogata Research Institute for Peace and Development. And it is a privilege for me to greet you at this dialogue with Professor Izumi Ohno of the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. The topic of our dialogue is Introducing Foreign Models for Development, Translative Adaptation. Professor Ohno is the foremost expert on the topic of translative adaptation, who has recently published an open access edited volume titled Introducing Foreign Models for Development, Japanese Experience and Cooperation in the Age of New Technology. Professor Ohno, good afternoon, and thank you for the wonderful opportunity to hear your research insights on the concept of translative adaptation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murashkin. I also look forward to this conversation.
The concept of translative adaptation is an innovative idea, and it helps our understanding of development processes and of Japan's approach to development cooperation. This concept originated in Japan, and it neatly captures Japan's experience of modernization. At the same time, examining this idea invites several questions that I perhaps would like to ask you in order to clarify the meaning and the nuances of translative adaptation. So, my first question would be, could you perhaps introduce how Japan has effectively practiced translative adaptation in the process of learning to industrialize? And would also like you to explain the roles of the government and the private sector at that time.
So the Meiji Japan, that is late 19th century, and post-World War II, reconstruction period from 1945, are the two major periods when Japan aggressively learned foreign models of development in order for industrial catch-up. In both periods, the government and private sector jointly worked hard to learn foreign knowledge and technologies, adapt to local context, and create their own industrialization model. Regarding Meiji Japan, industrial promotion was a national priority. So learning to industrialize is the national project. So government was the initiator at that time and also led the process of learning through various channels. So these include, for example, first sending government officials overseas to gain first-hand knowledge of advanced technology and political system. I think you may know Iwakura mission, which was dispatched in 1871 to 73, led by Tomomi Iwakura, who was the rank of prime minister at that time, with about maybe 100 people there. So they visited many countries, including United States and the UK and France and Germany and many European countries. So, and then second, hiring a large number of foreign expert advisors to mobilize for large-scale national project, which could include the shipyard project, railway, printing, the silk reading production, telegraph, etc. And in early Meiji period, government employed about 300 to 600 advisors externally out of their own budget. No aid was available at that time. So, and they also participate in these projects also provided opportunity for them to get kind of practical knowledge and learning. Maybe third channel is that the training and also educating Japanese people, young people, particularly in the Asia area where engineering. A good example is establishing Imperial College of Engineering, which is called Kobu Daigakko. It was set up in 1871. The Meiji government invited the Henry Dyer, the British expert. He made an important contribution to start the school and also teach it. So, and then that school became a kind of one of the top school for producing the brilliant kind of that engineering official, which worked for the government and also later led whole the industrialization process. So after maybe graduation, many those technocrats started to work for the public sector, and then but private sector job gradually increased because at that time there was limited opportunity for the private sector activity, but gradually it expanded. By late Meiji, around 1910, private sector experts exceeded those working for the government. So this means that the basis for human resource development for industrialization has been expanded very broadly. So in that sense, we can say that the private sector also responded to such government learning initiative.
Right. Would there be any examples, specific examples in that respect?
Let me give an example of Tomioka silk mill. Yeah. That is the first model silk factory established by the Meiji government in 1872 to learn modern machine silk weaving and produce high quality raw silk textile for export. So Meiji government invited French expert, Paul Brunner and his team, and then Meiji government assigned Japanese counterpart, and they really worked together for the preparation and setting up factories by utilizing local materials and then operationalizing them. So I think within 3 years or so, maybe expert left, and then a whole kind of factory have been maybe managed, maintained by the Japanese people. And also interestingly, I think there are, I think about 400 female were working at the factory. They got a lot of skill through how to operate those kind of silk processing issues. And then later they are dispatched to other part of Japan who are working for similar factories to really spread what they learned to the nationwide. After the World War II, unlike in the Meiji era, the private sector was the main actor of learning. So the government, particularly the MITI, Ministry of International Trade and Industry, acted as a facilitator of this learning process. And I have to say, public-private partnership was really key for these learning activities.
So in that sense, we can say that it was actual learning, policy learning.
Yeah.
It was not policy lending. It was genuinely learning, right?
Yeah.
Is that would be the right thing to say? Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. So let me give you some example. Yeah. For example, productivity and quality improvement. That is, I think, very famous, also good example of private sector-led learning. I think American method of quality and productivity improvement was, I think, adapted to the Japanese way, which is now we call Kaizen, those improvement activities based on the factories floor with a teamwork, and disseminated nationwide. But when maybe Japanese Japan learned that the American way, there was several private organizations such as JUSE, Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers, or JPC, Japan Productivity Center, who took initiative in learning, disseminating. And in the case of JUSE, they invited famous American statistical quality control expert, Dr. Deming. I think he is very well known for the Deming Prize, in those areas. So, but those kind of statistical quality control was primarily designed for the professionals or QC engineers. But when JUSE learned those the new technology or ideas, they invited Japanese academia to study how they can be applied to Japanese context. So Japanese maybe academia provide a lot of suggestions. They came up with the much more participatory QC circle, quality control circle, with the active participation of the frontline workers. Because Japanese workers are very much motivated in doing those kind of activity, in proposing what should be done for improving the company's activities. And then also JPC, as I said, is very known for the promoting productivity movement. They adapted it to maybe incorporating the human-centered approach. So tripartite arrangement among the government, industry, labor union is a very important feature. So in that way, I think that private sector organization took initiative in learning adaptation. And then I have to say the MITI and Japanese government provided very much complementary maybe policy, maybe environment. such as preparing for the standard, Japan's standard system, or export inspection system, or public research organization, kosetsushi, or Shindan system, company diagnosis.
Japan has conducted development cooperation based on what it has learned from its own experience. You argue that the Japanese approach to development cooperation has unique features which are distinct, which are different from those of the Western countries. Could you perhaps provide more details and give us some more examples on that?
Because Japan is the first non-Western countries which succeeded in industrialization, so it has a dual experience of being an aid recipient and donor. And such catch-up experience has shaped its unique perspective and philosophy on development and aid. So compared to the maybe Western type, maybe general, I think, framework-oriented approach, Japan tends to emphasize more the ingredient or concrete real sector activities, such as what kind of technology is suitable at that time, or human resources, industrial structure of the macroeconomy, etc. And also, Japan tends to emphasize on the gemba, which is a field orientation. In Japan, we say gemba is that the where action, real action is taking place. And then hands-on support, working together side by side with a counterpart. So I think those are some features of maybe Japanese philosophy and also reflected in Japanese development cooperation. I think this can be contrasted with a maybe Western type approach, which often stress general framework governing the principle of market economy, or accountability, governance, level playing field, and maybe good business environment. I think those are very much important, but maybe emphasis is different. I think both are necessary in order for the economic development, industrial development. But when we think about that, maybe Japanese thinking, the maybe ingredient approach is more emphasized. And this ingredient vice versa framework approach comes from Professor Yanagihara Toru. He is a professor emeritus at the Takushoku University, and he really compares those Western approach to Japanese approach, and I really think this is a very fascinating concept.
Would there be any specific examples there?
Okay, yeah. Let me share maybe two examples through Japanese development cooperation. Yeah. One is Kaizen promotion in developing countries. Kaizen emphasizes on the factory floor activities improvement by looking into the specific problem each company faces and then solve how to do it. And this is a bottom-up approach with workers' participation, with management commitment. So JICA does Kaizen support to many developing countries based on this kind of approach. And I think there are several experts who are kind of engaged in Kaizen, and also one of them, Mr. Kikuchi, he's actually our research collaborator. He wrote a very interesting paper comparing JICA approach and EU approach for quality improvement in Tunisia, where he worked. And JICA support Kaizen based on the factory floor improvement and also getting suggestions from the workers and solving the company-specific issues by training Kaizen instructors. EU approach to quality improvement is to help the companies to acquire ISO, that is the international standard, to be eligible for certain like environment or management and accountability, those things that requires documentation or process management, those issues. But I think these are much common international standards. So even for we think about quality improvement support through development cooperation, maybe entry point is different. And I have to say, both are very much complementary. And if I may add maybe anecdote, we can think of football game. If you try to make a good game, you need both. One is a good rule, and also you have a very well developed the ground for the player to have a really good game. So this is one condition. This is maybe framework approach. At the same time, you need to coach individual sports players based on their capability, based on their strengths. So coaching, tailor-made coaching is also important. So this is more maybe ingredient approach. So I think we have to think both sides. So I'm not saying which is better, but I think both are combined and can provide that better improvement in the case of quality or economic development or industrial development.
I see. So you've mentioned this analogy of players on a football field, and that made me think of human resources. Mm-hmm. What is the sort of human capital dimension of this process?
Okay. So I can maybe share with you some example of capacity development of Tibet teachers and school based on maybe Japanese Development Corporation. As you said, that the developing human resource that really match the labor market demand is so important. In the case of Japan, JICA support this Tibet technical vocational the educational training system to how to link with industry needs. So there are Tibet industry linkage kind of promotion activities are kind of very much active in Japanese Development Corporation project. And what they do is that they support actual activities and then introducing learning by doing. For example, when they develop the curriculum for the Tibet or curriculum for the manual for the teachers, they try to maybe work together with the companies and getting idea of the needs. So in that way, they try to incorporate that maybe that the business that perspective in this Tibet curriculum development, or try to work on employment support system like a job fair or career counseling or how to prepare for the maybe job opportunity information, etc. So by supporting concrete activities, they support that industry Tibet linkages. At the same time, when you look at the global maybe experiences, competence-based training, CBT, is very much widely promoted and also spread. This is more, I think, framework-oriented approach, and they are based on the development of occupational standard, which is based on the industry-specific and also workplace-specific. So based on the standards developed, that each Tibet will develop curriculum and also manual for the training for the teachers. So I think both are important, but maybe you can understand how maybe framework approach and also ingredient approach can be contrasted.
And how do these features contribute to facilitating translative adaptation? Would there be any specific examples?
So focusing on those growth ingredient and also Gemba orientation and also hands-on support, which I just mentioned, are very much interrelated issues. And I think those kind of maybe emphasis or approach based on them will assist the dynamic capacity development, what I call it, of partner countries. And this will facilitate the process of local learning and the translative adaptation. Instead of setting a kind of common maybe goal, maybe they support setting country-specific or company-specific tailor-made clear goals, and then try to solve real problems through concrete action. And then step by step, maybe together, those problems will be solved through learning by doing. So I think this is the one approach to maybe support the translative adaptation. And maybe I can give you some example. Yeah, as a knowledge corporation, Japan does the policy dialogue with partner countries. Not all the country, but with a selected country when national leaders are seriously committed. And this is one type of knowledge cooperation which aimed at enhancing government policy capabilities based on the continuous and interactive dialogue. And I think many donors say they do policy dialogue, but I think most of that policy dialogue which is done in international community is much more on the maybe macroeconomic or financial management or maybe governance areas. So maybe limited attention paid to the productive sector like industrial development, and where maybe real sector concerns of Japan has been reflected. And also the method that we do is that we jointly together with the maybe counterpart organization or business sector, study industry situation in deeply, and then discuss maybe where to go, the concrete goals. And then we think about benchmark countries. For example, I have been working for Ethiopia for industrial policy dialogue for many years until just now. And then Ethiopia was trying to develop apparel industries. And then, so we shared with them probably Vietnam and Bangladesh and also Sri Lanka can be a good maybe benchmark in the different stage of development, and then how they did it in some concrete bottlenecks Ethiopia has been facing. And ideally speaking, this dialogue can be followed up by JICA's concrete project like industry promotion, export promotion, or Kaizen, whatever. In that way, actual learning can take place through concrete project. And then we have a dialogue with ministers or policymakers or national leaders, so the result of the concrete kind of project would be shared, and what worked, what do not work, and what kind of additional maybe changes needed. So in that way, we try to maybe incorporate learning by doing or try and error process. Japan conducts this kind of policy dialogue in various countries like Argentina in the past, Thailand or Vietnam and Ethiopia, as I said, what maybe we can support through dynamic capacity development.
In the midst of changing landscape of industrial development, such as digital transformation, that we know as DX, climate issues, and sustainable development goals, do you think that the Japanese perspective and Japan's approach to development cooperation are still relevant? What aspects should change and what should not be revised, perhaps?
This is a very good question. So regarding maybe your first question was about whether maybe this new landscape, I mean, whether the Japanese approach or perspective of translative adaptation is relevant or not. My answer is half yes and half no. So let me start with what should change, because the new landscape brings changes in three ways. First is broadening the scope of industrial development, such as digitalization, as you said, and maybe much more linked with the service sectors, green, environment, and also social orientation like SDGs. So scope of industrialization is broadening a lot. And second is because of ICT, technology, digital development, the large flow of information, large volume of information flow is kind of is coming with massive speed, and we have to cope with that. And then third is a rising role of emerging donors who have more recent experiences in industrialization. That means that the Japanese position is more relativized. Yeah. So what does this mean for maybe Japanese maybe approach so far? So I think because of the broadened scope, it means that we have to think about that the more broad range of development strategy, not just focusing on the manufacturing, because there are more diverse maybe option approach available. And also new industrial landscape will require adapting this policy content to the maybe adapting policy content and also priorities. So, and furthermore, the broadened scope will demand a cross-cutting perspective, because that ICT, digital technology, will expose to many sectors. It can be utilized for many sectors, and then also maybe interface with users, various kinds of stakeholders and the consumers will be broadened. So more solution-oriented, that activities or drive becomes important. So, and then also large information flow with digital technology will require speed a lot. That I think Japan have to change a lot, including its development cooperation, and also maybe policymakers in developing countries have to be maybe agile. Maybe third point of a rising role of emerging economies. That means that I think Japan needs to sharpen its maybe unique advantages, because there are many more, I think, example or models, the recent example available. So we need to really think about how can we maybe focus on our comparative advantages, what we can offer. So that is we have to keep thinking about.
Then what remains valid and what should not be revised?
Okay. Even despite that the new landscape, as I mentioned, the learning foreign models with a lens of translative adaptation continue to be important, even if the scope of industrialization becomes broader and also digital technology enables speedy communication. The methods for learning foreign models remain varied and should receive even greater attention in the new landscape, which is, I believe, because that I think now that the new knowledge and technology are easily and quickly available to many people, so there's an even greater need for active and effective local learning based on their strong ownership. So I think translative adaptation is even more important in this 21st century, which face very much complex and broad range of challenges. And also I have to say, maybe we talked a lot about Kaizen, but it's important to revisit Kaizen from this maybe new angle. Of course, Kaizen will be very useful in productivity, quality improvement at the factory floor, but it may have interesting implication for at the individual human resource person level, because Kaizen encourages group work and teamwork and thinking creatively for suggesting maybe new way of doing. So that is maybe enhancing the non-cognitive skill ability, well, maybe it is called a soft skill, which could be very important for the digital world. And also Kaizen try to reduce redundancy and waste in the process, and also try to utilize that maybe such digital instrument like visualizing data based on statistical quality control. So those could be providing very good basis for moving to the digitalization.
Would you have any suggestions for future development cooperation, for instance, such as knowledge cooperation, in particular for Japan?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think let me make two suggestions. First, Japan needs to upgrade its capacities for industrial cooperation to promote the process of co-learning and co-creation and co-solving problems, because in the future, the nature of knowledge cooperation will and should take place much more in an equal partnership. Because development challenges in 21st century have become more complex and sometimes going beyond what today's advanced countries learned, overcome in the past through their own development processes. And also leapfrog technologies may now be more advanced and then maybe can be easily piloted, tested in developing countries. And then reverse engineering, it is coming to advanced countries. So that means that the learning together, solving problems together, and facilitating mutual knowledge accumulation. Second recommendation is that Japan should build intellectual networks with more systematically with the more recent industrializers, because through the decades of development cooperation, Japan has built a lot of network and working together with many countries, not only in Asia, Latin America, or the African countries. And I think some of them are already engaged actively in knowledge sharing or knowledge cooperation activities. And I think in this process, Japan may wish to play a facilitating role so that maybe those partners can maybe incorporate the lens of translative adaptation and also maybe concrete that the gemba or ingredient-oriented approach, so they can maybe share their experiences with that kind of angle too.
Professor Ohno, many thanks for your fascinating insights and very deep perspective into the concept of translative adaptation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murashkin.